So, you cannot be jailed for pinching a woman's bum. That's false.
Now, don't forget, a little later, we're still talking about the tennis here. Jason Vale is back with more delicious juices and smoothies. And
Don't forget to put TWS in front of your message.
they're all laughing, and then he fell over as well. All right, it's hilarious. Right, has every woman been molested? A really heavy question. It could be a flasher in a park, a grope in a public place, someone grinding up against you on a crowded train. And I really do wonder just how many of you girls have been abused in such a way. And I guess, to make it clear, don't really want to talk about rapes and serious sexual assaults, which I think are treated seriously by the courts, though some of you may disagree, but it's kind of all the other offences that seem to be treated much more lightly. I mean, the maximum penalty for a first-time flasher is 3 months, but hardly any of the 1,300 men nicked for that last year got anything but a fine, even though flashing is widely accepted as a stepping stone to more serious sexual crimes. Not every woman I know, I said this earlier, has been molested, but an awful lot have. I didn't speak to her today, but I hope she'll forgive me for saying this. My mum's been flashed at. I've worked with people who've been touched and groped on the tube. One time a man got his old chap out on a train and started fiddling with it to give the woman opposite a fright, and this was at peak commuter time. OK? Now, according to one poll, as many as 2 out of 3 women have been molested, and one of the reasons I was talking about it is because of Fiona's book. And in this interview in the Telegraph, you said that it suffered a minor sexual assault, and I think been flashed at as well. And it just begged the question, really, how commonplace is this? And what do you girls do about it? What do the authorities do about it? In a moment, we're going to take your calls. But first, Fiona, I mean, it is quite common, isn't it?
It is. And the thing is, when I started, when I wrote that, and I was thinking about the more serious end of sexual crime, and that is stranger attack, rape or assault, is very rare.
Yeah.
But then I was looking at, as you say, the kind of sort of lower end of that kind of crime. That can be really, really upsetting for people. Obviously, you know, flashing and you know, groping in the tube and that kind of thing. And then as I began to talk to other friends, I thought, actually, this has happened to almost everybody I know. It's happened to me. You know, I've been groped on the tube when I used to live in Milan as a child, and that happened every week. You know, and I was sort of between the age of 10 and 14. You know, I'd think, is that someone's briefcase, or is that something else that's sticking into me? I mean, it was just horrendous. I've been flashed at a couple of times.
Can I ask, what do you do?
Well, at that age...
What should you do?
At that age, I did nothing. And I just felt horribly ashamed and dirty and humiliated by it. There's a story in the book where a person that I was talking to told me that she was on the tube, this is in London, and she felt this thing sticking into her, sort of around her sort of bottom area, and she thought, not again. This time I'm going to do something. So she said very loudly, whoever is pressing their erection against me, can they please stand back? Anyway, and so there was this awful kind of... and this little space opened up around her. No one said anything to her. All the blokes looked like they wanted to die. And all the women, actually, they weren't supportive. I think everyone was just horribly embarrassed that anyone said anything at all. And no one kind of caught her eye until she got off the tube. And after she said she felt sort of half embarrassed, half triumphant that she'd done something. And then a friend of Jackie's who wrote the book with me read that anecdote and did that last week.
In fact, funny enough, our PA has whispered in my ear saying it's happened to her as well. This is how commonplace it is.
But this friend read the anecdote and did that thing and said, you know, whoever's pressing against going to be stand back. And again, no one said a word to her, but it did stop. And certainly whoever did it, well, I suspect, will think twice about doing it again. I'd like to think so.
What would you... what's the advice in the book?
Well, I think when it comes to flashers and gropers, apart from cutting off their testicles, a bit like, or getting to do it themselves,
send
like the beaver, send to
Canada,
Canada, you know, or stand under a falling tree. That would be top of my list.
That too.
Otherwise, personally, I think what one should do is not necessarily what one always could do.
Yes.
I think with a flasher, the best thing to do is laugh at them. And with the groper, the best thing is to speak out. But actually, you know, would I do that every time? I don't know. You know, I've been flashed at 3 times and I've never said anything.
You're quite shocked when it happens, actually. To be honest, you're a bit frightened and you're a bit shocked and you don't know what to say. And what I was wondering about was when it happens to me now, after all these years of being...
So it's happened to you?
Yeah, as well. But being on television is the worst when people find it their right to touch you. And then what do I say that isn't going to end up out of context in a tabloid? Do you know what I mean? It's almost now I've lost my right to say something.
Oh, that's terrible. You should feel like that.
I feel like that. And, you know, I do.
Well, in case if it gets spun, in case that person then goes to the paper and says,
Yeah,
"Oh, actually, all I was trying to do was shake a hand," and
yeah,
she got all sort
exactly.
of uppity.
And I found this on several occasions. Yeah, and I get really stuck.
Okay.
And then if you sort of make a joke of it, you feel like you've allowed it.
I get concerned about people not doing stuff. The man with his old chap out on the tube, it took a while before I turned around and went, that's disgusting. And then everybody kind of got it, and he was off at the next stop. Very embarrassed, ran away, and that was all of that. But you also talk about violence and how, despite having self-defence classes, you wouldn't tackle the wimpy guy that you...
Yeah.
Now, I would be exactly the same. You are intimidated, but as a man, Richard, it's worth saying we're not all like that. I mean, that is worth saying, isn't it? Because sometimes you just sit there and I just despair of my sex. I really do.
Yeah, I mean, it's embarrassing, isn't it, on behalf of gentlemen around the planet, I mean, in Japan, it sounds like it's happening virtually to every woman every day. I mean, so, it's obviously a bit of a Japanese type of thing, but not Australian.
Big problem, yeah.
In India, they call it Eve teasing.
Eve
teasing, and there are huge posters everywhere and reminders that and adverts about Eve teasing, because I spent a lot of time there learning dance, and these very sharp elbows have been developed for a reason, because being on the train and on the buses there, I actually started to actually elbow the rubbing up that occurred as a...
Have your girlfriends, would you say? I mean, I was saying, has every woman been molested? I mean, it's...
Well, if the statistic is 1 in 3 women have either been raped or sexually assaulted, so if 1 in 3...
That's the serious end.
Is it
mostly by people they know.
Yeah.
Not saying it makes it any better,
No,
but that's by people
but
they
if
know.
that's that statistic, then if you think about that, then what's the next statistic?
Amy,
I believe every woman has in some way.
It's happened to you?
Oh, and it was an awful story, and it was just really, I find it highly offensive. I don't want anybody.
What did you
to
do?
touch
What
me.
did you do?
Well, I turned round because the hand went where it shouldn't go. I was turning around, and it was one of those where they thought it was funny, like pointing at each other, like who was it type of thing. And I was just like, who did that? But then what happened? Like he kind of walked off to a group of girls who then started to go, who was it? Who was it? Like turned it around on me, like as if I'd done something wrong. It was really, and it was so upsetting. I just walked out of the bar. I couldn't even be there. I was just because you get worried about what's going to happen after that.
Absolutely. Well, let's take some calls. See what people say.
Okay, we'll go to Susan first on line 1.